Well, thanks a lot for inviting us today. My name is Jeanne Sorin, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Chicago. And in the next 5 minutes or so, I'm going to present another project focusing on Uganda, though from a different perspective and methodology than the project Meredith presented earlier. And so this project, Pollution in Ugandan Cities, Do Managers Avoid It or Adapt in Place, is joint work with Vittorio Bessi, Matt Can, Nancy Zulugracia, and Thomas Opos. So as developing countries are becoming increasingly urbanized, the cities are also becoming increasingly polluted, to the extent that a country like Uganda is going to have levels of urban air pollution that are comparable to Chinese cities. And this comes with the corresponding potentially important negative health and productivity impacts that have been established by the literature. Besides, production, and especially manufacturing production in these cities, is dominated by small firms, with production and retail happening at the same place and which mostly produce outside. Therefore, workers' exposure to pollution at the workplace is potentially a major issue. And in this paper, we're going to collect new data on pollution and firms to study the joint distribution of within city pollution and economic activity and investigate how small firms cope with pollution through two different channels: avoidance, meaning locating the firm in a non-polluted area of the city, and adaptation, meaning wearing protective equipment or adopting different organizational strategies. So very simply, we think of small firms managers as maximizing profits by choosing first the firm's location, which is characterized by both pollution and profitability, so there could potentially be a trade-off here, and then whether to invest into protective equipment. We believe that the perceived costs and benefits that are going to determine the optimal choices may vary by manageability. And so in this project, we're going to collect the pollution and firm data that is needed to study these optimal decisions in a random sample of urban areas in Uganda. So first, for pollution, we collected georeference measurements of PM2.5 using two types of monitors, stationary and mobile monitors, in order to build a measure of the spatial variation in pollution. Then in the same areas and time periods, we ran a detailed representative survey of 3 manufacturing sectors. And so for these small firms in carpentry, grain milling, and metal fabrication, we're going to collect data on firm location, profitability, as well as pollution perception and adaptation. We're going to study how small firms managers deal with urban pollution in 2 stages. First, we're going to establish that road traffic creates a bundle of pollution and profitability by regressing pollution and profitability on the median side of roads while adding a rich set of controls. Then we're going to look at managers' avoidance and adaptation by regressing firm density and protection on the median size of road and manageability when relevant. So what do we find? Well, first, we established that road traffic indeed creates this bundle or this positive correlation between pollution and profitability. Indeed, you can see here a sample map where the dots correspond to our pollution measurements. And you can see that the larger road here is more polluted or has darker red dots. And we also find that pollution peaks at traffic rush hours, which suggests that indeed road traffic is a significant source of pollution. Besides, we also find that larger roads are more profitable, and this effect partly comes from being associated to a higher number of customers. And this finding is consistent with our firms reporting getting most of their customers from walk-ins and doing limited marketing. So now let's see how firms optimize profits in this polluted environment. First, we find that firms do not systematically avoid polluted areas because moving away from pollution also means moving away from profitability. And firms report that access to customers is the main reason for the location choice. Interestingly, we do not find differential avoidance by manageability of firms' characteristics, suggesting that market access is the main constraint for most firms. Second, however, we still find that firms partially adapt to pollution given their location, and that there is more adaptation in firms that are ran by higher ability managers. And this result holds both when looking at managers who are more likely to provide protective equipment or allow flexible schedule to avoid peak pollution as they have high ability. But it also holds when we look at workers themselves. And indeed, we find that workers employed by high ability managers are going to take more protective measures themselves and are more aware about the dangers of pollution. The fact that we do not find evidence of sorting by workers type suggests that managers who we interpret as small status leaders in urban Uganda do have a role on workers' own attitude towards air pollution. So finally, to conclude in 2 sentences, we find that our result on clustering near major polluted roads is going to extend beyond manufacturing and our specific sample, and seems especially prevalent in retail and low-scale services. For some sectors, unbundling pollution and market access could be a promising way to decrease pollution exposure at the workplace. And this could happen at the firm level by separating the production and retail locations, but also at the planners level with policies like industrial parks. And last but not least, managerial-driven adaptation leads to welfare inequalities for workers in terms of pollution exposure, but also open the question about the value of pollution training. And we are currently running a follow-up survey to clarify whether better managers protect more because they have better information about the damages of pollution, or maybe because they have a better perception about the local pollution. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I'm looking forward to answer any questions or comments on whatever I did not have time to talk about in 5 minutes. Thank you.
If you have a question, please feel free to use either the hand sign on Zoom or just go ahead and ask.
Hi, yeah, great paper. It seems really interesting. I was wondering, how do you measure manager quality, and how does it relate to the profits of the firm? So what I was thinking is there any link between the fact that I'm a better manager, so I'm going to get more profits anyway, so maybe that marginal reduction due to better protective equipment doesn't matter as much to me?
No, exactly. So to measure manageability, so we use these measures that have been developed by Bloom, Van Reenen, and McKenzie and Woodruff. And more precisely, we use 5 scores. So we use a marketing score, stock score, recording score, financial score, and forecasting score, which we obtained in our survey, with our questions. And then we use this to build a measure of manageability. So this is not directly driven by the profits that the firms make. And actually, we do find that managers with higher quality do have more profits, but profits do not enter directly how we construct our index.
Right, thanks.
Oh, and Vitor and Tommaso, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything.
I think there was a question in the chat from Lucy. I don't know if she wants to ask her question out loud.
Sure. I was just wondering, you mentioned that you see flexible work hours as a way to avoid peak pollution, but I was thinking, how do you separate that from also just avoiding peak traffic, for example, and commuting times?
Can you I didn't hear everything. I'm sorry.
Oh, just that it seems like avoiding, for example, allowing workers to avoid peak traffic and commuting times would look really similar to allowing them to avoid peak pollution through flexibility. I was wondering if you can separate those.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I don't think we can separate both, because you have this, by the mechanism of pollution, that pollution arrives with a lot of traffic. So you have higher pollution when at traffic rush hours. But even if managers were to allow workers a flexible schedule to avoid high commuting times, a side effect of this, which would really matter for their exposure to pollution, would be that they would get less pollution. So in terms of the welfare consequences and the health and the productivity, the effects would be the same. But we cannot distinguish whether managers explicitly target reducing pollution exposure during traffic time.
Also, Lucy, if I may add, I don't remember actually the exact number, maybe Vittorio or Jeanne do, but a lot of workers actually go to the firm walking. So then traffic avoidance, will not change the commuting time. It will literally just change the exposure to pollution.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Any more questions? Florian?
Yes, thank you, Jeanne. That's super interesting. Do you have a sense of what is most important for the managers? Is it more the health effect? Like, are good managers also more benevolent and they want to protect the workers? Or is it more the productivity effects, and the good managers maybe are better informed about the detrimental productivity effect of pollution?
So this is a great question. Currently, with the data that we have, we cannot distinguish them. So in the questions that we ask the managers, we ask them basically what matters for them in terms of the location they choose for the firm, and most of them respond that it's access to customers, which is consistent with, managers just, they need to make profit to have the firm surviving. We currently, or like next week, about to run a follow-up survey with the same managers in the same firms, trying to get a little more at what do managers care about, whether they care about market access, whether they care about pollution, how harmful do they think pollution is for them and their workers, health and productivity, etc. So right now we have some of this data, but not enough to get to a I guess, convincing answer. But hopefully in the next, months or so, we'll know more about this.
Thank you.
And this, I think, just to follow up, one reason it really matters is that the consequences in terms of policy recommendations are going to be different, right? One question is, do we need to just inform them better about what's the harm of pollution, both in the short term and in the long term, especially when you have a labor market that is not so smooth and you have a lot of frictions when workers stick with the same firms for a while. So managers need to internalize the productivity costs and even like the short, medium-term health cost of workers? Or is it just like a more structural problem where we need to separate pollution profitability?
Askar, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thanks. Maybe I missed it, but what's the importance of industrial firms in the total? So what's their contribution to the total air pollution?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I don't think you missed it. I don't think I had time to talk about it. So if we were looking at firms in the US, for example, making the point that firms do not pollute would be a huge claim, which would probably be misleading. But here we're looking at firms in carpentry, metal fabrication, or grain milling that have about 5 employees. So we do not think that the firms in our sample are major producers of PM 2.5 or other pollutions. So we see them as consuming pollution rather than producing pollution.
Okay, then it's kind of hard for me to understand the importance of the problem because, well, besides the air pollution, like from what I know, the most important problem is basically waste management on the city level. And I'm just wondering, like, I cannot clearly see, maybe I missed something, but how important is the problem in terms of actually improving, for example, the life expectancy?
Oh, so do you mean how bad is air pollution for life expectancy in urban Uganda compared to other like waste management issues?
Yeah, so basically maybe I missed it, but I cannot quite see the importance of the problem.
Oh yeah, of course. So waste management, as you said, is a major issue, and unfortunately with our data, and we have nothing to say about it. With regard to air pollution, so there are estimates by the AQLI, the Air Quality Life Index, suggesting that if air pollution was to go down in Uganda to the levels that are recommended by the World Health Organization, you would gain on average 1.8 to 1.9 years of life expectancy. And so in the paper, we talk a little more about what would happen if most firms who right now